So good afternoon, everyone. I know some of them are still getting lunch, and I know some students are going in and out of class. But we do have a hard stop at 1 because we have to take Glenn back to the airport. So let me start by introducing myself. Joanne Lee, Dean of FIU Business. I want to welcome everyone for being here. And alum, current students, faculty, staff, and friends, we're excited that you are part of today's presentation. So a special thank you to our partners at National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, FIU Business, and the Hollow School of Real Estate. Thrilled to be partnering up with you on this very special occasion. And I'm excited to say this. Welcome home, Glenn. We are happy that you are going to serve as our CEO speaker today. And thank you for traveling all the way from cold New York and to spend a beautiful day with us here in Miami. So welcome home. And for those who haven't been back to campus lately, I want you to know this is a very exciting time for FIU Business. FIU Business continues in its rise to the top with 8 programs receiving top 20 rankings right now. That's my commercial time right now, okay? Number 1, we just got word yesterday, we continue to be number 1 in HR management by HR.com, both undergraduate and graduate. We're the number 1 in real estate research productivity in the US and only number 2 globally after National University of Singapore. Our international business program ranks number 6 by US News and World Report, the highest ranked US news program in FIU. And our Master of Science in Finance ranked number 6 globally by Financial Times. And our Master in Marketing ranked number 6 in the US by QS World and University Ranking. So FIU Business currently is the number 1 producer of master degree graduates in the country. That's a lot of people who don't know that. We are also home to the only Center for International Business Education and Research in the state of Florida. And there are only 15 in the country, so we're very proud of it. And FIU Business is proud to bring top business leaders back to campus through our CEO Speaker Series, and it's made possible by our generous benefactor, Dr. Herbert Wertheim. The series was created to provide a platform for CEOs like Glenn's to share the incredible insight and business acumen and personal stories of success with our students and the community. And today, we are extremely honored to feature our CEO, a proud business alumnus who is a 40-year veteran real estate executive who remains at the top of his game, at the top of his industry. Glenn has been referred to as a turnaround titan, successfully taking the helm of troubled real estate companies and making them profitable. Now, throughout his fascinating career, Glenn has served as the CEO of several major real estate firms, beginning in 1983 when he co-founded O'Connor Capital Partners, a privately owned independent real estate development and management firm specializing in retail and multifamily residential properties. Glenn was the CEO of New Plan Excel Realty Trust, a commercial retail REIT formerly listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Under his leadership, New Plan was transformed into one of the nation's largest public real estate companies, focusing on the ownership and management of more than 400 community and neighborhood shopping centers encompassing approximately 68 million square feet of retail space. He was the CEO of Central Properties Group, an Australian public LPT, which owned 22 million square feet of retail property in Australia and 100 million square feet in the US. He served as president and CEO of Cushman & Wakefield, one of the world's largest commercial real estate companies, with 16,000 employees in 50 countries. Today, Glenn is the CEO of VEREIT, a full-service real estate operating company, which owns and manages one of the largest portfolios of single-tenant commercial properties in the US. The company has a total asset book value of $14 billion, including approximately 4,000 properties and 95 million square feet. Glenn has served on numerous corporate boards as well as on university advisory boards at NYU, Baruch, Arizona State. He's a former trustee and member of both the International Council of Shopping Centers and Urban Land Institute, and served on the board of New Alternatives for Children, a nonprofit health and social services agency whose exclusion mission is to serve children with medical disabilities and chronic illnesses and their families. Glenn earned his undergraduate degree from Rutgers and a master in management in real estate from our FIU business. Today, Glenn will share some highlights of his inspiring story, and trust me, we already cut his bio significantly so that I can make time for him. So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together to welcome Glenn home.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Well, of course, Glenn.
It's terrific to be back. I have to tell you, I'm going to be the oldest alumni you have ever met. I was speaking with Jenny, who was kind enough to pick me up this morning. I went here in 1972 and graduated in 73. Here was not here. Our classes that we had, I think that one building was here. I drove around a little bit. The one building, the tower building, that may have been here because this was an Air Force base. And so it had a bunch of hangars for airplanes. And so where we had, our classes were in hangars. They had these fabricated walls put up, and a class would be here, a class would be here, a class would be here. Someone just asked if we have air conditioning. Air conditioning, we weren't sure how to get out. You know, it was really different, but it was a terrific program. And what I'd like to talk about for a few minutes is education in real estate. And then we have a bunch of Q&A that Joe's going to hit me with, and then we'll ask if there's any Q&A from here. But what I have felt for a very long time, especially coming here, that real estate needs an education basis. If you ask my wife today, when she speaks to somebody and they ask her, what does your husband do for a living? She says, oh, he's in the real estate business. They still say today, oh, he sells houses? Is that what he does? Imagine how bad it was in the 1970s and 80s. No one had any sense of what real estate was. As a matter of fact, I would say most people would think we were scallywags, right? We sold land underneath water. That's what real estate people did. We don't do that. You know, we are a huge capital market today in the United States. Our company is a member of NAREIT, National Association of Real Estate and Investment Trusts, which is public real estate. We have $1 trillion of equity traded on the exchanges, which means we have about $2 trillion in real estate just in public equity. Private equity has another $9 trillion. So we are a huge part of this economy, and yet without education, no one would ever know. I've felt for a long time what we did here back in 73 was terrific. Now, how that happened was really interesting. Back in 73, there were only 2 other universities besides FIU in the country that had a real estate program. Actually 3. Wisconsin, Georgia, and Texas. And what FIU did, they went and stole a guy named Terry Robertson from Texas. And Terry came here to start the program. And from that point, you can see today there are hundreds. I mean, Bill, you would maybe know, or Joe know, there are hundreds of universities now that provide education in real estate. In New York alone, where I live in 2 places. I live in Phoenix. We're headquartered in Phoenix, so I live 50% of the time in Phoenix, which isn't so bad if it's the right time of year, right? People like here to come here instead, but Phoenix is okay. And I live in New York about 25% of the time, and I run around the country about 25% of the time. In Phoenix, there's a terrific university called Arizona State that has a great program today that I participate in. In New York, I will participate in NYU, Columbia, and Baruch. And there are many of us, certainly I'll tell you in New York, who want to contribute back to these communities to teach the young people about what we do every day. And anything we can do to encourage that long term, you will find a lot of encouragement in the community, real estate community, from people like myself and many, many others who will do that. So education has been the heart of what I believe will bring this industry, continue to bring this industry to the forefront as it should, because it is so important in what we do every day. Now, when I speak to students about education, and I do that a lot around the country, I try to express a few things, and some of it is from my background in history, but some of it is just simple and to understand. Many students that I'll speak to will say, well, I want to be in acquisition, or I want to be in disposition, or I want to be in leasing, or I want to be in marketing. And my first reaction is you don't have a clue what you want to be, most likely. If you're beginning college, you really don't, but it's nothing wrong with have a vocation, but be flexible. So my first point to students is be flexible in what you're thinking, because what you may want to do today could be different from what you want to do tomorrow. The second very important point I speak to the students is when you think about what you want to do tomorrow, there are two important issues. What is your talent? Everybody has a talent. For instance, I have no talent in art. I can't draw, I can't sing, I can't dance, my wife and my daughter would tell me. But perhaps I have other talents. Perhaps I can communicate. Perhaps I could take logic, take something complicated, make it simple. So there are talents that each one of us will have that you'll find out through life that will help you determine where you should ultimately be, and I'll talk about in the real estate profession and business. The other important part about talent is you've got to figure out where's your passion. And you need to have passion where you end up. I'm just going to say I'm in the 60s. I'm in the high end of the 60s, right? I'm going to work. I had a conference call about 2 quarters ago, and the conference call means that I'm on the phone explaining our company to the public, and analysts get on. And so an analyst says, Glenn, you're getting on in age. What are you thinking about? Are you going to leave the company soon? Which is a bad question, right? Because I can't say yes to that. So it's a bad question. I give them a bad answer. And my answer is, look, I'm going to work until I die. It's only a question of whether I die here. Okay? But I actually believe that I don't want to stop. I love what I do, and I love coming to work every day and working in the real estate business. So the student needs to remember they have to be flexible in what they want to do, and then they have to find their talent and their passion, and that's where they should go. That's where they should move into. And in our business, what I love about our business, we have many different areas. We have accountants in our business. And I have to tell you, the personality of a real estate accountant is really different from a real estate leasing person by a lot. And they're never going to mix. But that's okay, because there's a room for the real estate accountant, there's room for the leasing person, there's room for the general counsel of a company that has real estate, there's room for an acquisition person, there's room for marketing, there's room for IR, there's room for HR. So we have many professions in our business that you could enjoy and be passionate about, and you just need to be flexible about where you go and how you get there. The other important conversation I have with students in their education, and they say, well, how do I, when I move ahead, how do I know what I should do? And I actually counsel them and say, at some time in your life, you're going to have to take a risk. And don't avoid that risk. Embrace that risk. Because you may choose not to take it, but understand why you didn't take it. Because it may be better for you to take that risk. And you know what? You could win or lose. But if you feel good about yourself, you should take that risk. And again, FIU was one of my risks, in that what happened was I went to Rutgers University, and now I'll kind of explain how some of it's happened to me. And I went there not knowing what I was going to do, very frankly, but I signed up, and I was in the business administration because I didn't know anything better than that. I said, I'll do that. And then I find out I really have an aptitude for computer programming and systems analyst, and I get a minor in computer science. So I graduate, and most people weren't born, and I graduate in 1971, and it was a deep recession at the time. It was really bad. And I ran around everywhere thinking I was be a computer program systems analyst. I couldn't get a job. There's no one who would hire me. But just like many of the students here, I had a loan. And I said, I better do something. I read the paper one day, and it says there's a job for a real estate appraiser. I didn't even know what a real estate appraiser was, but it was on Long Island where I lived. And I said, I'm just going to. So I go there, and I apply, and I get the job to be a real estate appraiser. By the way, $5,500 a year. Apartments in New York that's a month's rent, maybe. It's too low for apartments in New York, actually. So I take the job because I have nothing better to do, and I say, look, I'll take this job because I have nothing better to do, and then I'll eventually get back into the computer business when I grow up. Well, so I start the job, and I'm appraising single-family houses, and I'm not liking a whole lot of what I'm doing, and I actually enrolled in a school to go to get some night courses in the computer field, and then they say, you know what, we're opening up an office in Miami. And I was I'll call it the punk analyst at the time. I wouldn't know anything, but they said, look, we need someone to do all the dirty work. So there's a senior guy, a mid-level guy, you want to do this. So I'm sitting on Long Island, New York, and it's a risk, right? I'm not even sure I want to be in the real estate business, but someone says, I'll move you to Miami, and I chose to take it. Now, that risk is my whole background. If I did not do that, and I decided to leave that company, I have no idea where I'd be today. I probably think it wouldn't be so good, actually, to tell you the truth. But I did, and I came down here, and then I got married within 6 months. And so my wife and I came down here together, and we loved it, by the way. Miami's just terrific. I still have this great affection for Miami. There's nothing, I was telling Joe, when you're married and your first home is in a spot, we had an apartment which is the best place I'll maybe ever live. For those of you if you come off on South Miami Avenue, right past Mercy Hospital, there's a road there on the left called Glencoe, Glencoe. I see my name on the road one day. I make that left because I'm looking for an apartment, and sure enough, down the end of that road is Biscayne Bay. I didn't even know that. And there's a little 8-unit apartment building on Biscayne Bay. There's a guy out front. He's the owner. I said, I'm looking for an apartment. He said, well, the person just left, and I got the apartment. So I get this apartment on Biscayne Bay. My wife comes down. She's a nurse working at Mercy Hospital. Our office was on Brickell, a mile away, right around the corner. I bought a little 16-foot boat with a 40-horse engine, and I used to go fishing out in Biscayne Bay. It was in my backyard. I'll never live in a better spot. Now, by the way, that apartment's not there anymore. They knocked it down as a big condo. But it was great. And that risk got me here. And then I decided, well, I don't really know a lot about real estate, and that's when I read the paper, and there's a program at FIU to get a master's degree. I said, well, maybe I should get some more education. And that's how I signed up, and I got here. And then from then on, I really started to enjoy the business and liked it. For those of you who have been through the boom and bust, I came here in a boom, 71. By 77, it was bust. This market, there were a bunch of half-built condos everywhere. It was a mess. Our business didn't do so well here. It was a valuation consulting business. And so I got a job back in New York at JP Morgan. So I actually did. My daughter was born here in Mercy Hospital. And within a couple of weeks, we moved back. We moved back to New York. And then I have lived in New York for most of the time. Although Joe mentioned I was with a company called Centro Properties. And there's a question in terms of where I was, how I got through some companies, and maybe I'll answer the question here. But Centro was in Melbourne, Australia. So this is another risk. I'm with a company called New Plan. We sell ourselves to a company called Centro, and we sold ourselves. And then when I get to business, I will tell you, real estate says location, location, location. I would say timing, timing, timing. We sold this business to the Australians in April of 2007. They bought us all debt. I was going to stay for a year. They had 22 million square feet of retail in Australia. We had about 100 million square feet in the United States. I was going to help them combine and go figure out what I was going to do in life. Within a very short period of time, the world fell apart. By the summer of 2007, the cracks in the CMBS market, the cracks in the financial markets were there. By the end of the year, Centro owed. They didn't foreclose, $8 billion of debt. They were in default. This is one of those situations where when that happens, when there are problems, the CEO goes, the CFO goes, the board changes, they bring someone else in. So they asked if I would, because at least I knew the US, I didn't know anything about Australia, the real estate. They said, would I move to Melbourne and take over the company that was in $8 billion of default in a different country? And that's a risk, right? My wife, I said, Mayor, I've been asked if to move to Melbourne. And she said, Melbourne, Florida? I said, Melbourne, Australia. She said, what? That's a little far. And it's far. We would leave on a Friday afternoon from Kennedy at 7 o'clock, and we'd land in Melbourne on Sunday morning at 9. Because not only is it at least 24 hours in the air, it's either 14 or 16-hour time difference. But I did that. You know what? That was the most fantastic time of some of our lives. And we lived there for 2.5 years. We did some work on the company. And then we moved back. We moved back because our kids are here and my wife's mom is here. So we did that. But it's those type of risks. So if I were to come back to the students, just be flexible, understand your talents and where they lie, have a passion for what you do, and then recognize and have enough confidence in yourself that you'll take risks. And I'd be willing to bet that you'll take the right risks and you'll find out where you want to be. With that, maybe I'll come back to you, Joe, and then there's some good Q&A we can talk about.
Shall we invite our CEO to take a seat?
Sure.
Please take a seat. So in anticipation of Glenn coming, we actually asked our audience to kind of like submit questions ahead of time. And we collected a really good set of questions that were really smart. So we are going to start to open up, some of the Q&A session and start with a question you submitted ahead of time. And if we have time left, the room is yours. You can ask him anything. So Glenn, throughout your career, you've been able to successfully turn around many real estate companies, right? What factors do you consider when determining whether a company can be turned around? And how do you influence people to bring about those change you think it's needed?
Well, it is something that I have fell into. Joe had mentioned in 1983, there was a company called O'Connor that was started. It was a fellow named Jerry O'Connor, myself, and an admin. Again, another risk. I was working for a company in New York called Landauer Associates. It was a fine job. I met this fellow, Jerry O'Connor, who was a senior to me at the time, and he said, I want to start a company. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I'm not quite sure, but it'll be real estate, and we'll have to figure this out. But I liked him a lot. There were some opportunities. Again, I go home. My poor wife, I've been married 46 years, and one of the reasons why she would say we stayed married so long is because I travel a lot. But I went home, I said, look, we just had our second baby. I'm thinking about starting a company with this guy. She said, well, do you have a salary? I said, no. Do you know how much money you're going to make? I said, no. She said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't know. It's a risk. And I really do believe that there's room. He's a good guy. I think we could do something. We started this company, and we grew it to about we ultimately were asset managers. We had $7 billion of assets under management. We had 750 people at one time. And we sold pieces of our company in the late 90s. And we still had an opportunity fund piece with JP Morgan. It was very well capitalized. But my first turnaround, so I get a call from a company called New Plan, and from a headhunter who says, we're looking for a CEO of a public company. And if anyone back in 1998 or 1999 would have realized the public markets went to hell. Mm-hmm. The new REIT industry started in the early 90s. I say new REIT because there were REITs before them, but that's when it really started. They were thought to be growth companies. Very quickly, they were proved to be not growth companies, and by the end of the 90s, all their stocks were well below their IPOs. And New Plan was in no better shape. It was an older company, but it really had some problems. But I said, I've never been a public CEO. It's different. It's a risk. But why not? So my partner, Jerry O'Connor, at the time, I went to him. I said, look at Jerry, we've been partners for 17 years. There's something out there I think could be different. He said, look, if that's what you want to do, go do it. If you don't like it, come back. I mean, that's a real partnership, isn't it? I mean, it's really terrific. Unfortunately, Jerry has passed away now, but he was a terrific guy. So I went. This was a company that had a $22 stock price, and by the time I got there, it was 11. within 6 months. And it was because it did a disastrous merger in 1998. I would say one of the worst mergers in the history of man. It didn't work. The senior people left. The company had no business plan. It had about 350 shopping centers. It had 10,500 apartments. It had a bunch of land. It had a bunch of mezzanine loans. It was a mess from an operating standpoint, not from a debt standpoint. Its debt levels were good, and that's a very important issue. So when you ask what to do in the turnaround, if you go into a turnaround that has too much debt, you have no control. The company's in the hands of the lenders. That's very hard. Here, I knew I could have control of the operating part. And so we spent 7 years. We sold all the apartments. We sold everything but the shopping centers. We reinvested in shopping centers. We put a lot of money in our shopping centers. And between 2000 and 2007, we went from $3 billion to $6.2 billion, and we sold the company to the Australians for $33.15.
Wow.
Now, if you said, what's the most important thing about going into a turnaround? You did not cause the problem, right? You want to go somewhere where you didn't do it. And if you didn't do it and you have a little common sense, I have found that, and you have operating control, you can work with good people and turn situations around. Centro was different because, as I mentioned, Centro bought us, paid a lot of money, didn't put enough equity in, and was in not default, but was in default, but never got a default notice. And there's a difference that I'll explain of $8 billion within 10 months. Now that's a turnaround, but that's a turnaround where the debt controls you. We lived on standbys. Now again, I didn't cause the problem, okay? Although people claimed I did because they said, we sold them the company at too much. And I said, that's really not true. And the reason it's not true, if you sell something and someone capitalizes it wrong, they buy you with all debt and they don't raise equity, that's their problem, right? That's their problem. We got all cash, by the way, so that didn't matter. But we had to work with the lenders. So for the time I was in Australia there on that turnaround, that was really hard because we had a standstill agreement means for a period of time, the lenders will not give you a default notice. Because if they give you a default notice, in Australia, you go into something called administration, which means you liquidate. So we lived day to day knowing that that company could be liquidated and 450 people could lose their jobs just like that. But we had standstill agreements. We prevented it for 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. We had 23 lenders. And we were able to work out a deal with those 23 lenders after about 18 months where we had a 3-year plan in place where they gave us breathing room. And we were able to then, because they gave us breathing room, that we were able to turn that situation around. And in fact, we had the piece in the US, for those of you who are following the public markets, that company was new plans called Brixmor today. Most of those people were there when I was there. The assets are the same. Well-capitalized company, originally bought by Blackstone and then taken public. The company in Australia was refloated and then merged with another shopping center company. Has been very successful. So that since we got breathing room, we had good assets, we had good people, we were able to make it work. One piece of it, this was 2008 to 2010, which was the worst history in real estate since I've been around. Wasn't as bad in Australia, but it was pretty bad. The best thing that happened to us in a turnaround in that period of time was that Lehman Brothers went out of business. Right. That sounds weird, doesn't it? That happened in September of 2008. And what I found, and this is by accident, but good, when you're negotiating with lenders who control you and the world shakes and there's no foundation left because Lehman is gone, the real estate operator has the power. Because what we said to the lenders, look, you better make a fair deal with us because you want 100 million square feet in the US back and you want 22 million square feet in Australia back. What are you going to do with it? You know, we know how to run it. We're the proper custodians of your assets. Give us time and we'll fix it. So we actually had a lot of strength in that turnaround when that happened. I came back to the United States after we did that, and then I took a job which was the biggest risk I've ever taken. The CEO of Cushman & Wakefield. I got to tell you, that's not real estate. That's just headaches. It is just headaches. But I got interested in it because I got a call from another headhunter. And I said, Cushman & Wakefield, it's a brokerage firm in New York. And he said, no, it's not. And Cushman & Wakefield had 13,000 people in 50 countries around the world. It's a huge business. And I thought that could be pretty interesting. But boy, that was hard because out of those 13,000, there were 6,500 brokers. And are there any brokers in the audience? Raise your hand. There you go. You got a hard job. You have a good job if you do it right. But if you're the CEO of 6,500 brokers, you just have a headache every day because every day a broker comes in and wants more. Every day. But after a while, I was able to understand that. Now, that company was owned by the Agnelli family out of Italy, who owns Fiat and Chrysler, by the way. And they bought it in 2007, which meant they paid way too much. And by 2010, when I got there, they had EBITDA of 180 million a year. When they bought it, it was negative 90 by 2009. And so when I got there, we were running big negative deficits. But we used some logic. We had to cut some people. We looked at where the margins were better, where the margins were worse, which countries around the globe were making money, which were losing money. And within a period of time, we were able to get EBITDA positive. And as you may have followed, Cushman & Wakefield was sold to a company called DTZ about 2 years ago. And went to the public market and is now public about 6 months ago. So that company is very successful. I have fond memory. I was there for 3.5 years. I have more crazy stories about real estate in 3.5 years than 40 years anywhere else. It's just crazy. The company I'm with now, it's called Vari. It used to be called ARCP. ARCP was the company that bought a lot of assets in a short period of time. It had $2 billion of assets in the summer of 2013, had $20 billion in the summer of 2014. A quick lesson, you can't ever control your business growing that fast, and they did not control it. By the third quarter of 2014, they put out an 8K, which is a public announcement, that AFFO in the first quarter of 14 was overstated. It was intentionally not corrected in the second quarter. If you're a public company and you put out a statement like that, your stock drops. It dropped 3 to 4 billion in market cap. Chairman's going to go, the CEO is going to go, the CFO is going to go, the CAO is going to go, and they're all gone. You're also going to have the DOJ file a suit against you. You're going to have the SEC file a suit against you. And any lawyers in here? Raise your hand. Nobody? Good, because I really don't like lawyers these days. I really don't like them. I'm not a lawyer. I'm really happy. You're going to have lawsuits. So the company ran into big trouble very quickly. That was in the third quarter of 14. I started just at the end of the first quarter of 15. We are still spending time turning the company around. We had 9 material weaknesses. For those of you who don't know, Sarbanes-Oxley controls our control functions as a public company. And one material weakness is a disaster. We had 9. We had too much debt. We had too much concentration in tenants. We lost investment grade rating, a whole series of issues. Again, similar situation. I didn't cause it, but at the root of this company was good assets, and once you got the top level going, pretty good people. And we've been able to do a relatively good job. Our stock isn't as good as we like these days. We still have some impediments, some issues, but I'm comfortable with where we are. Our portfolio's good, our team's good, our balance sheet's in good shape, we're investment grade. We're going to have to gut it out for a little longer, but we'll be okay. The last part of your question, after I go just through that, is people. People are really important in everything I just said to you. Because in every situation where there's a turnaround, you can bet there are people leaving, there are people going home at night telling their kids and wives, this is a bad company, I better look for a job. And I understand that. I would do the same thing in many of the companies that I went into. So you need to very quickly, or in some reasonable pace, get credibility back. And we've done that in those companies in a few ways. I've always found that culture is a very important part of these businesses. Because by definition, there's a problem in culture or else I wouldn't be there. And I've come to a really simple way of trying to express culture in all these companies, which I've had some good success with. It's really a biblical saying. Behave to others the way you want them to behave to you.
Right.
And you need to practice that. And if you're not going to practice that, we don't want you. And on most pieces of paper, and then we define behavior. You need to be ethical, honest, and so forth. And in most pieces of paper, you'll look at that culture, and the definition of culture is on that piece of paper. We also need to have a mission statement. What's the purpose of the company? Now, I call it a mission statement. The millennials now call it a corporate commitment. So I'm an old-fashioned guy, so it's corporate commitment. And our corporate commitment is that we have to service our stakeholders, and our stakeholders are our shareholders, our tenants, and our employees. All three have to be taken care of in this company. And by the way, if all are a little unhappy, it's okay. But if any one group is really unhappy, if our employees are happy, we have a big problem. If our tenants are unhappy, we have a big problem, and if our shareholders are unhappy. So our corporate commitment, we have that constituency. We better make sure we take care of that constituency. Then the last thing I'd say is we try to stress a business approach. How do we approach business? Let's keep it, we need to be transparent, we need to be disciplined, we need to be consistent, and the last word we use all the time is, don't make it complicated, keep it simple. And I use those words all the time. And I have to, every quarter, we have a board report, we have an audit committee report, we have a comp report, we have a corporate governance report, we have a Q or a K, we have a supplemental. And all the time I'm saying, do we have the same discipline this quarter as last quarter? Are we consistent with last quarter, or did something change, and why? Are we absolutely transparent to make sure everybody knows what's going on? We didn't complicate anything, did we? Let's make it simple. I use it all the time. So getting the teams to understand how to work together is as important as anything in any of those turnarounds.
Fascinating stories, real life story, and I love the advice you talk about. Pay attention to your stakeholders, not just your shareholders, right? After all, this is the 4th largest public university in the country, right? 58,000, enrollment in this. And you talk about the control of the operation. You talk about your skill to negotiate with creditors. And you also talk about, be passionate about certain things, right? We have a technical question to ask you. Would you recommend for an individual investor to invest in real estate via REITs or via direct real estate investment? You talk about passion. Let's hear the passion here about REITs.
Here's the passion. Invest in REITs. No, I'm biased. I'm biased. It's a good question, though. And I have been a private CEO and a public CEO, and there's a question which is not that, would you rather be public or private? And the real answer is it depends. It depends on how you want to finance your company. If you're an investor, and let's assume you're a retail investor, and you don't have $10 million, but you have $100,000 or you have $200,000, public real estate is a better choice. And the reason public real estate is a better choice is that I always felt that the only way I've been able to de-risk investments in real estate is to be diversified.
Right.
Diversification is really important. And if you're buying a property, you may hit a home run or you may not. Maybe that's important. Maybe you're a real risk taker and you want to hit a home run or not. So maybe private's okay. But if you're investing and you're not gambling, and I make a big distinction, and I talk to our folks all the time about the difference between investing and gambling. We're not gamblers. We will never bet the company, ever, on any transaction or anything we do. That's gambling. If you invest $200,000 in a company that you could win or lose, you're gambling. And you may want to do that. But if you want to invest, you should be investing for longer periods of time. And that investment is more diversified in a public company or a series of public companies. You can go to the New York Stock Exchange and you can, if you choose to believe that industrial in the Southeast is a good place to invest, you can find a real estate investment trust that invests there. So you can put part of your money there. You may believe that apartments in parts of the country are good. You'll find a real estate investment trust that will allow you to do that. So what public real estate does, the whole purpose of an REIT, I think everybody knows, an REIT is nothing more than a corporation. We're a Maryland corporation. That's what we are. But we file as a real estate investment trust for tax purposes. And to have tax-advantaged companies, you have to meet different tests. And one of the tests is that no more than 5 or fewer people or groups can own more of our stock. And the reason Congress did that, which was the right thing to do, is so that individuals can invest in fractional interest, a share of a company, and get this large diversification. And at the same time, if we meet those REIT tests as a corporation, we are tax advantaged in that we don't get taxed at the corporate level. So we're allowed to distribute to you as the shareholder cash without being taxed, and you get diversification of real estate either in a company or a series of companies. And that's the purpose of public real estate. So if you're investing and not gambling with that amount of money, I would say you should buy a REIT.
So it's the access to a diversified portfolio through REITs, right?
Yeah.
I'm certain this question, it's from one of our very hard-earning students, and here's the question. I'm planning on saving up $20,000 for the next 2 years in order to invest in real estate. Should I wait until the market goes down, or is there any other way that I can start investing?
You know, I'll answer that question. There's a story. There was an investment banker from Lazard who I knew pretty well. And he had a client who had sold an energy business and made $20 million. So his client was coming to him and saying, you know, I'm thinking about investing, and he had all these ideas to invest his money. And the investment banker thought every one of those ideas was bad. So he said, look, here's my advice. Don't invest the money, spend it. Because you invest it, you're going to lose it. If you spend it, you'll never spend $20 million in your lifetime. I give the same answer there. If you're worried about hitting a market going up or down, you'll never figure it out. And no one's that good. I'm not that good. I've never been that good. And so that's a gamble.
Right.
If that person has $20,000, wants an investment, they should be thinking about, do they want income? They could find an income investment. Are they looking for capital gain? They could find a capital gain investment, but give it to a pro who knows and understands how to invest, because they'll never figure it out.
Right. So it's the attitude towards the money and also the risk tolerance, right?
Yeah.
Like what we, teach in finance classes. So, well, lately there is a lot of foreign policy moving pieces, and this question is actually asking you: how do you consider the impact of political instability on your daily business? And how does it impact your strategic planning, or in your case, mission?
There are some very important thoughts there. Actually, there's some students who I think are here who did an analysis of VERIG, and I actually thought it was a pretty good analysis, so they made some mistakes, right? Some is good. We're a pretty hard company, so they did a really good job. But they were looking at our rate of return over periods of time relative to the growth or lack of growth of this economy. And what I said to them was, it's the complete opposite of what happens to our stock. For instance, and here's a global event, 2016 in the summer, we had Brexit, which is a major global event, instability. And for those of you who followed the real estate REIT market, how many people think because of Brexit we went up or down? Who thinks we went up? Who thinks we would have gone down? Okay. Well, here's the statistics. When Brexit occurred, the world shook. And the world market said, where's the safest place in the world to put my money? United States. If I'm going to put my money in the United States in a safe investment, what's a safe investment? Hard asset, real estate. What's a very safe real estate investment in the United States? A triple net lease with a long-term tenant and modest growth. That's how the market thought. And the reason I know that, our stock, which is a triple net company with long-term leases at modest growth, went from $8.50 to $10.50 in 60 days.
Wow.
The whole REIT market went up that summer. We loved Brexit. It was great. Those Brits should do it again. They may. Who knows what they're going to do. So political events do affect us because we're stocks. Long term, we should react as real estate, but short term, geopolitical effects can affect us as stocks. And the next point in time was at the end of last year. At the end of last year, if you remember, interest rates all of a sudden went flat. The Fed said they weren't moving interest rates. Lack of growth in the world started to hit. The Dow dropped to 23,000 from 26,000. REITs went up like this. We went up like that. Same exact issue, flight to safety. So when the world is growing and people want growth, and interest rates are rising in anticipation of growth, there's going to be a reduction in REIT shares, and the reverse is going to happen as well. The last point I'm going to make on this one, we talked about this, which I really think is important. Now I'm going to forget about geopolitical. I'm just talking about the United States. I think what happened in SALT, that the tax issue that we have, could be dramatic. And you're a beneficiary of it. Because I'm going to tell you, people in the Northeast and people in California are now looking to different locations to live. And it's going to be North Carolina, Florida, Texas, our state in Verite, Arizona, is hot as a pistol from people from California and Oregon, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, there's going to be shifts in demography around this country caused by this tax change that we are already reacting to. If you look at where we're going to invest, we'd rather invest in Florida and Texas and those other states at this point in time. So that whether it's geopolitical or influences in the United States, they will have an impact on real estate here.
I love what you're saying because before this presentation, we talk about that, and I say there's a lot of newspaper articles argue otherwise. We haven't seen any empirical evidence on this and that. And I think what you're talking to us right now is try to use the common sense to think through this a little bit and pay attention, right? So you know that we designed this Q&A is called Pick the CEO's Brain. Here comes the question, really picking your brain, right? One of our students actually wrote and say, Glenn, what advice would you give to a smart, driven college student about to enter the real world, and what advice should they ignore?
Well, I question the word smart in that question. I think part of it is, where have you made mistakes and where have you not made mistakes, which mold what's going on. There's another question there about tax, and so what I'd say is, if you're investing in real estate, don't invest because of tax. Some of the biggest mistakes I made were in the 80s. We were creating tax advantage real estate situations that we thought were terrific, and then 1986 hit, and the tax law changed. And I got to tell you, we lost a lot of money. And what I realized back then was, in real estate, you should invest for real estate fundamentals. You should not be investing for tax. And what you have to be careful about today is opportunity zones. For those of you who don't know, this is a plus, but you have to be careful. There are certain zones in the United States that the government has said, if you develop in these zones, you'll be tax advantaged. There's nothing wrong with that, because I think some of these places need some development. But people will invest way too much in those zones, and the fundamentals will get lost. So that's a negative. I would not be investing for the sake of anything other than fundamentals of the real estate longer term that you believe in. Some of the pluses I think that I can talk about is trying to recognize when there's good real estate, good people, and a bad company. And that's where I've made a lot of money on. Just recognizing that there's some good in something that has been run bad. And that's the best answer I can give.
Well, Jenny just signaled me that she has to take you to the airport, but indulge us two very short questions, a very short answer for that, right? What is your favorite failure that you ever made, if there is such thing? And what book you're reading currently?
I actually will go back. The biggest failure I made was investing for non-fundamental reasons.
Okay.
I mean, I have to tell you, non-fundamental reasons.
Without doing your research.
Well, but because I was influenced by tax.
I see. Or
I'll tell you another place I was influenced, which is a bad idea. There are funds that get created in the United States that are called closed-end funds, and institutions invest, and you usually have a 3-year period to invest the money, or else it goes back. That's a bad idea. Anytime you are forced to invest in anything, you will make a bad deal. And I have made bad deals because there was a time frame attached instead of just looking at the fundamentals. So investing for tax or investing for time are two really bad issues. In terms of books, I think there are two books that I would quote. One is, there's a book on Lincoln actually the movie is called Lincoln, but there's a terrific book which I actually have the movie. I watch it all the time, and I read the book occasionally. I have it on my iPad. And it's terrific because here's a man who had some of the hardest decisions in the world. And I kind of live in hard decisions. And he made them so logically and so brilliantly that I think that was a terrific book. The other is, if I weren't a real estate person, which I really like, I would have liked to have been a physicist. I'm not sure I'm good enough to do that, but I love the book on Einstein, the history. I mean, it is really a fascinating book to think that there can be somebody, now he was very talented and he was very educated, who could have ever thought about relativity? I have read relativity, both general and special, more often than anybody here has read real estate. I still don't get it. I just don't get it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and thank you for Glenn Rufrano.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Awesome.